Man, feel a bit sad making this video. Today we're going to be talking about The Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, a Jackson-verse anime prequel. Recently came out in cinemas, and when it was first announced a couple of years ago at this point, I was majorly hyped up for it. I love me some Lord of the Rings, and the Jackson trilogy was my life as a little kid. Lord of the Rings, Narnia, Harry Potter, Star Wars prequels, Pirates of the Caribbean. We who grew up through the 2000s were truly blessed with the rise of so many epic franchises. So I was really excited for this. Anything that can bring me some nostalgia is a plus for me, and I do love some anime. If they could somehow make a hybrid Lord of the Rings Studio Ghibli type film, that'd be top tier. That hype carried me through all the way until we actually started to get snippets and witness the marketing of this thing. Initially it started with still images, and it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, to tell you the truth. I didn't massively like the visual style they were going with, but hey, I had to have faith. I mean, this Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's involvement nonetheless. Surely they couldn't mess it up. Next, the trailer came out, and to me it really didn't look all that good. I'm not even talking about the story here, I'm talking pure visuals. It came across as really, really cheap. Almost like an 80s fantasy anime in terms of visual quality, but transplanted to the modern day. I have to be honest with you, my hype had severely dwindled, but I couldn't lose all hope. So I ignored any further pre-release and committed to seeing the film, come what may. The other day it was released in the cinemas, and so I went to see it, and all my fears were confirmed. I didn't like it. There were some decent bits, I'll grant you, but for the most part, I thought it was genuinely bad. It seems the majority of critics tend to agree with this consensus. Currently, as of writing this, it has a 52% critical score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is fair. However, as of writing this, the audience score is 85%, which in my eyes is rather absurd. I had to think a lot about this because I just couldn't wrap my head around the score. The last few years have shown that criticism of adaptations of Tolkien's work know no bounds. For once, I thought I'd be in agreement here, but apparently not. Is it because it's part of the Jackson-verse that people seem to be treating it with the kids' gloves? Is it because that not many people are actually bothering to see this thing? It does seem like it's destined to be a bit of a flop at the box office. After all, from what I've read online, a lot of people actually assumed this was a made-for-streaming movie. The film has a pretty low budget, so I'm sure it'll do fine in any case. Overall, the only excuse I can come up with in my eyes for the ridiculously high score of the movie is the fact that it's attached to the Jackson universe. It is the only possible reason that this movie has been saved from salty fanboys ready to tear it limb from limb. It was mediocre, to tell you the truth, absolutely mediocre. The film being anime probably helps its case, but I don't know. If this was the Rings of Power that had this level of writing and acting and effects and everything, it would be rightfully getting lambasted. Because Amazon bad, Jackson one true king. How could anybody else dare to make an adaptation of Tolkien's works and all that jazz? Here though, it just gets a bit of a lukewarm reception. We all collectively sit around to lie to ourselves that it's a genuinely good movie. I will grant you that not everywhere is like this. I have seen some critiques. It's just that overwhelmingly I've seen a lot of love, or not even love, excuses. Muted critiques, where you can tell that they think it sucks, but they're unwilling to hate on it too hard for whatever reason. Whatever reason. We all know the reason. Regardless, there's no point in harping on about how it sucks over and over again. We need to talk about the film itself, specific critiques, and why I don't like it. When we break down a movie, it's pretty simple to just chuck our thoughts into three major categories: the animation/visuals, the sound, and the narrative. We can start with the visuals. If you've watched any of my previous reviews on animated films in the cinema, you'll know for the most part that this category is a formality. Very, very rarely is a cinematic release going to have visuals that are just bad. Sometimes I might not like the stylistic choices that have been made and the setting and the world design. That can happen. The Netflix film Spellbound is a rather recent example of high quality animation, but poor quality design choices. I love anime. You only need to take a quick look at my channel to confirm this fact. I know that a lot of people were turned off on this film from the get-go because they don't like the prominent style you might get from an anime movie. I realize there's no set look, but there is a general trend in the way things look, in the same way there is a general trend in the animation from the big American CG studios. Now that's understandable, and a good reason as to why you might not watch it. I wouldn't call it a fair critique as it's just the style they went for, but I can see how it would be jarring. Personally, I didn't mind the anime, although I was concerned when I saw the trailer. The mouths, they didn't sync with the dialogue, and it looked to me like it was a rough edit before they went over the fine-tuned details in the animation. A bit like a concept animation that's 80% there. Once I watched it though, it really didn't look all that much different, and I was very disappointed by it. The actual animation quality does not hold up for me. At times it seemed sloppy and kind of low res. Like I said, it seemed almost not finished. I can see why people assumed it was made for streaming. The quality just wasn't there, especially for a cinematic release. I think the actual design of the world was pretty good, but at the same time, how much of that was down to the film and how much was lifted directly from the Jackson trilogy? It almost felt like it was an animated live-action film. the opposite of a remake that you see all the time these days, where it was shot, structured, and animated as if it was supposed to be a live-action movie. It was really jarring, and whilst there were moments and sets that looked good, overall it didn't hold up. If we're talking specifics, I'd have to say that the scene early in the film where Helm's confronted by Freka is a good example. The whole thing looks terrible, but especially when Freka's speaking and they linger on him. What's he doing with his arms? He's just waving them side to side again and again. It felt like they had the same clip cycling through on repeat. I have to say, for me though, the worst parts were the battle scenes. Smaller scale battles, I can give a pass on. For the most part, they worked fine, like the battle with the Oliphant on the plains. Even if, thinking back on that, it was rather bland and by the numbers, not gripping or visually exciting at all. However, that's nothing compared to the big battles. I particularly want to mention the horse charges. In the trilogy, the Rohirrim have so many good ones. There's the desperate charge against the Warg Riders to protect civilians from death on the way to Helm's Deep. We follow that with Théoden's charge out of the Hornburg, which leads into Gandalf and Éomer's charge from the top of the hill. We then have the double charge on the Pelennor fields. First against the Orcish army, and then again against the Haradrim. Absolute classic moments of the franchise, and among the best battle scenes ever put to screen. In my eyes, the two major horse charges we saw in this film were visually depressing in comparison. The first one I could somewhat forgive. The idea behind it's the last stand of Helm and the army of Rohan at Edoras against the invading force. Circumstances having changed, they're caught off guard and they don't have time to assemble a force to properly fight. They do muster an army in the end, and they do battle, but the charge just couldn't live up to any of the big charges at all. It lacked gravitas, emotion. Most importantly though, it lacked a proper army. Think of all the horse riders they CGI'd in for those important charges. Couldn't draw a couple more in here? It felt so empty. So completely and utterly visually barren. The charge they do feels like something out of The Dragon Prince, a made-for-Netflix cartoon with a minimal budget. Even that feels insulting, specifically to The Dragon Prince. That's not even the worst of it though. There's a second charge right at the end that serves as an intentional reference to Éomer's charge at Helm's Deep. In this sequence, Hera has sent word to her cousin that the time is now. And so he leads a supposedly large army that we actually see camping out at Dunharrow down to face Wolf and his Dunlendings. When they do the charge though, I swear it looks like he has a maximum of 20 soldiers. Same with Wolf's army, honestly. It just felt comically undersized, like a joke or a parody. A pale and sad imitation. I just couldn't help but chuckle when I saw it play out in cinema with the story pretending it's meant to be epic and intense. Nope, it's just sad in all the wrong ways. I think that's enough about the visuals though. If I was dissecting this thing scene by scene, we'd be here all day. Let's talk audio instead. What can I say? The music was awesome. I truly believe it was great. Yes, it was carried a bit by the use of the Howard score themes from the original movies, but in the end it did what it needed to do. At least here they didn't go wrong. Can't say the same for the voice acting though. Just no good from me, sorry. The reality is that so many of the performances felt lifeless, and the dubbing looked off at many points. It sounded like they were desperately trying to sync up with the animation, and that it affected the performances. Surely at that point, this is the stage you think, oh, well, I don't think people are going to see this film based on who the actors are anyway. You'll either be interested or you won't, so maybe we should save on some budget and get some lesser known but talented voice actors who have more experience in dubbing and can put on better performances. No? So that's two mostly dud categories. Maybe they can pull it back with the narrative. I'll spoil you right here. They don't. War of the Rohirrim tells the story of Hera, daughter of Helm Hammerhand, the king of Rohan. Hera is known all across the land as a bit of a wild child, strong-willed and a free spirit. She's doted on by her family and dreams of a bygone era where the Shield Maidens, a group of warrior women, were still commonplace. One day, Lord Freka comes to Edoras to ask for her hand on behalf of his son Wolf, who is also Hera's childhood friend. Helm says no as he plans to marry her into Gondor, and the two old men come to blows after an exchange of insults. Freka's killed with a single punch, with Wolf losing his mind and trying to kill the king before being banished in turn. He goes full incel from this point onwards and returns after an undisclosed stretch of time alongside an army of Dunlendings. He kidnaps Hera and fails to keep her. He attacks Edoras and kills the elder son of the king and later executes the younger son. He incels around for the rest of the movie, doing not much until the end where he's tricked into attacking, his army's smoked by Hera's cousin, and he dies at her hand. It's a story adapted from a small chunk of appendices, and you can tell. You can really tell. It felt like there were long stretches of film where pretty much nothing happens. This happens in the trilogy too. In that context though, it's filled up with world and character building. Here, it wasn't. Hera is an undercooked character. We're told she's untamed and whatnot, but we never really see it. The most she does is ride around on her horse by herself. I found her largely bland and severely lacking in personality. Very troubling for a main protagonist if you ask me. There's nothing really to connect with. And that right here seems to be the theme of the film, a struggle to connect and a struggle to care. Hera has two brothers who die. It's supposed to be a big emotional moment, and yet it doesn't feel all that sad because you hardly got to know them or really to know the other characters who loved them. When Theodred dies in the Two Towers, it's sad because you've already started to care about Rohan through scenes with the royal family. Here, you never build that connection to Hera or to Helm, and so when the lads die, it lacks the emotional gut punch that they were clearly going for. Furthermore, there's a huge chunk of the film where it feels like time slows to a crawl. The siege! It lacks excitement completely, and there's no good character building to compensate for that. On top of that, there was a bunch of shit that just left me scratching my head and wondering, why? Why did no soldiers try to help the heir to the throne during the retreat? They left him to die. How is Helm Hammerhand so strong? Strong enough to tear open the frozen gates with his bare hands. Why didn't he go inside when he did that? Why didn't the soldiers try to help him with the gate mechanism when he broke the ice and opened the gate? Why were there not archers on the walls to try to save him? Why didn't they throw him a rope? How did he not die of frostbite far earlier when he was going out and ripping dudes apart with his bare hands in the snow? Why didn't they build up the nephew and future king character? He does nothing all movie. Why hadn't he attacked far earlier? Is that ever explained? He had a massive army at Dunharrow. Who the hell is this old wicked witch looking lady at Helm's Deep? Why did they keep the old shield maiden alive past her expiration date? She should have died at Orthanc to save Hera and up the stakes. Her beating up Wolf, the main villain, ruined his aura completely. Honestly, the only good part of the narrative for me was Wolf, who was the most pathetic incel character. He felt real and so deeply hateable. At every turn, he fails because of his bitterness and stupidity. He succeeds in making you want to see him die horribly and witness the hero's triumph, which is good, because you don't have enough of a connection to the heroes to want to see them win for their own sake. Their only purpose is to take down the guy you hate. So if you had to say there was a highlight in this movie, it has to be the villain. It's not much in the sea of mediocrity, but it's something at least. I think it's clear this film was made for the rights, and that's all, which is a shame. More Tolkien should only be a good thing. But it is what it is, I suppose. I assume regardless of how this movie performs, more adaptations will be made, and if so, I hope they up their game. I enjoy Rings of Power and I'm more open to stories in Middle-earth. Just make them good ones! With all that being said though, these have been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the movie if you've seen it? Did you like it? Hate it? If you haven't seen it, will you? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe and let me know.